Hi! Are you ready to learn how to make your very own sourdough bagels from scratch? When I first made this recipe, I couldn't believe how easy it was, and I've been making a batch of bagels almost every single week since, and my husband and I have one for breakfast almost every morning because they're that delicious. I'm Kelly, and welcome to my enlightened little kitchen. Equipment. You will need a food scale, a large mixing bowl to initially mix up the dough. And if you have a stand mixer, you can use that for the kneading process, but I do not. So I will show you how to knead the dough on the counter. Then for the first rise, you will need another bowl with a lid. And if you don't have a lid, you can cover it with tin foil or something else just so that the dough doesn't dry out during the first rise. Then for the second rise, you'll need a cookie sheet and a kitchen towel to drape over the shaped bagels so that they don't dry out during second rise. Then when we're ready to boil and bake the bagels, you'll need a pan that's deep enough so that the bagels will float in boiling water. And if you're missing any of these things, I've made a nice list of options for you to purchase them below so that you can keep making these bagels. Ingredients that we will need: 225 grams of water, 100 grams of your active sourdough starter, 20 grams of honey, 10 grams of salt, and 450 grams of bread flour. Let's chat about the baking schedule. As with most active sourdough recipes, when you decide you want the thing, you need to plan for it. So, whatever day you want your bagels to be done, freshly baked, and ready to eat, go 2 days ahead of that. So 2 nights before you want your bagels ready, you'll want to feed your active sourdough starter to make sure that you have 100 grams ready for the next day. Then the second day is when you'll prep the dough. So earlier in the day, you need about 10 to 15 minutes to mix and knead the dough before it rests for about 5 to 6 hours during the first rise. Then you'll need about 10 to 15 minutes to divide and shape your bagels before letting them hang out for the second rise for about 1 to 2 hours. And once your bagels are puffy enough, you stick them in the fridge overnight where they can hang out and chill before the following day. Whenever you're ready to make them, your bagels will be ready to pull out of the fridge to boil and then bake. So let's envision that you want to have your bagels ready on Sunday morning. That means Friday night, feed your sourdough starter. Saturday, we'll make, rise, shape, rise, and leave the dough in the fridge so that Sunday they'll be ready for you to boil, bake, and enjoy. Let's prepare our sourdough bagel dough. So I have my large kitchen bowl on my kitchen scale, and I have it set to grams as the unit. And I've already pre-measured this water to make it easy, but you'll measure out 225 grams of water into your kitchen bowl. And then you will add 100 grams of your active sourdough starter into the water. I ran out of basket filters, so I'm using a little cone filter, which is cute. It's like a little gnome hat. Nice and bubbly and happy. I have tared my scale back to 0 so that I can measure about 100 grams of my starter into the water. And it's okay if it goes a little bit over by a few grams. It doesn't have to be perfect. There we go. Then tare the scale back to 0 and squeeze in 20 grams of honey. $21, close. Then tare the scale, 10 grams of salt. $13, it's gonna be okay. Then once you have all of these ingredients in your bowl, you're going to give it a good stir to incorporate them before adding the flour. Once you have that pretty well mixed, tear the scale so that you can pour in 450 grams of your bread flour. 450, nailed it. Then you will mix your flour into what you've already created until the dough becomes scrappy, meaning it's not going to be smooth, but as long as everything seems like it's pretty together, then you can start the kneading process, which, like I said, can be with your stand mixer if you have one of those, but I will show you how to knead your bagel dough on the counter because that's what I do. So this dough is looking pretty scrappy. It's okay to have some loose flour because we will just knead that all together by hand. Time to clean the counter to get it ready for the kneading process. I need to give a shout out to Dr. Bronner's Pure Castile soap because that's what my husband and I use to clean almost everything is soap. We just dilute it with a bunch of water, and then you're not spraying chemicals all over your counter to knead them into your dough. Soap does the trick. Nice and clean. And now we get to pour our scrappy dough onto our nice clean counter where we will knead it together. This takes about 5 to 10 minutes to get everything incorporated. But because this is such a low hydration dough, you don't need to wet the counter or your hands. You don't need to flour the counter because we've got lots of flour we're gonna work into the dough. It's not gonna stick to anything. We'll just get it as smooth as we possibly can before the first rise. All right, our dough is smoothed out enough to let it rest for the first rise. I honestly love the hand kneading process. It gets to be this really awesome ritual of pouring love into your dough and knowing that you're feeding yourself and perhaps your family with some amazing homemade bagels at the end of it. I have greased a bowl with some olive oil to put this freshly kneaded dough into. I like to pat it down just so that I have a better visual of when it has doubled in size, because once it doubles, it means that it's ready to divide and shape into bagels. So just make sure you cover your bowl with a lid or a foil so that it doesn't dry out during this part, and let your dough rest for 5 to 6 hours. Or like I said, once you see that it's doubled in size. Okay, my dough has been hanging out in a warm space for about 5 hours. And it has risen. It's doubled in size, look at that! Which means that it's time to separate it into our little bunches of bagel dough so that we can shape them into that glorious round shape that a bagel is. Great, so let's have a clean the counter moment, a little ASMR maybe. What a great sound. A nice, clean sound. Aha, great. So now we get to pour our bagel dough out onto our freshly cleaned counter. And I like to try to keep it in a rounded shape because it helps me when splitting the dough into equal pieces. So I like to kind of recreate a circle and then see that it's even all the way around. And when I was first making this recipe, I was doing full-size bagels, which is great, but my husband and I were only eating half a bagel for breakfast every day. That was our serving size. And instead of someone getting the top and someone getting the bottom, I decided to make smaller bagels. So mini bagels is our norm, but since I'm guiding you through your own bagel making process, I'll make half of them full size and half of them mini. So you can decide what option you want to try. But this dough recipe creates 6 full-size bagels or 12 mini bagels. So math, I'll be making 3 full-size. How many mini? 6! Good job. Okay, so I'm just dividing evenly with a knife. But if you have a dough splitter, amazing, use that. And if you are worried about the bagels being uniform, you can also weigh them with your kitchen scale. Cool. So 3 of these large wedges will roll into full-size bagels. And then I will split these others in half to make our mini bagels. And then you can eyeball it and say, well, you know, this one's pretty small, so we might steal a little bit of dough from another wedge and glop it on there. Boop, boop, boop. Great. Then once you have your dough portioned, we are going to form balls of dough so that we can then add the hole in the center so that it really looks like a bagel. So to do this, I take 1 bit of dough and I just start pulling from the outside underneath inwards. So we're drawing from the bottom into the center of the dough glob to create some nice surface tension. So I usually go around several times until it feels like it's starting to tighten. I haven't made a full-size bagel in a while, so this feels funny having this much dough. Okay, great. So now that it feels pretty tight, I flip it over and I create this cupped shape with my hand like I'm holding a baseball. And I put it over the dough and just roll it on the counter to help it become more round. Great. So we'll do that with each dough glob. Now it's time to give our dough balls their signature bagel hole in the center. Most bagel shops roll out the dough into a long strip and then create the circle, but this is the Kelly method, and I feel like it works just great. Take your finger and stick it in the middle of one of the dough balls, pink, and then pick it up and tear a little hole through it. And then with 2 fingers, you slowly start to twirl them around themselves. Little twirl. Pull it out slow. And you want the hole in the center to be larger because it will shrink as the dough puffs up and bakes. So you want it to be a little larger than a standard bagel hole. And then once you have it stretched, I've already pre-dusted my cookie sheet with some cornmeal to help it from sticking, or help the bagels from sticking to the cookie sheet. But you can also grease your cookie sheet if you do not have cornmeal. But cornmeal helps to give it that classic bagel shop dusty bottom, if that matters to you. So we'll just twirl each one of these dough balls. And also, it's okay if your dough is looking a little wimpy, because it's gonna puff up. Now that the bagels have been shaped with their signature hole And placed on our cookie sheet, they get to go through their second rise. So cover up your dough with a towel so that it doesn't dry out during these moments. And usually it takes my bagels 1 to 3 hours for them to puff up to twice their size. It just depends on how warm your space is. I'm gonna set these outside in the shade because it's a nice summer day. So they'll probably puff up pretty quickly. And then once they do, you'll just stick them in the fridge for overnight so that we can boil and bake them tomorrow. The bagels have been outside for just over an hour and they've gotten nice and poofy. Ooh. So we'll cover them up with our towel and pop them in the fridge for overnight. It's the following day and our bagels are ready to be boiled before they are baked. The reason that we boil our bagels first is to give them that nice skin into the chew that makes a really yummy bagel. Since we have a little kitchen, we do not have a stovetop, so we invested in these induction burners that work really well. You can set this one to the 1/5 of a degree, and it has all these different settings, which it's so cool to be precise, doesn't have an open flame, and it heats up the pan really well. So you just have to make sure that you're using a pan that works with an induction burner. And we have these non-toxic ceramic green pans that we absolutely love. So now that I have my pan with about 1.5 inches of water, just enough water so that the bagels will float in the boiling liquid, we're going to put this all the way to its highest setting so that we can bring the water to a boil. And I'm going to squirt a little honey into the water as well, because this will help give the bagels a nice shine to the outside. Our water is boiling. I'm gonna turn it down a little bit. And now we're going to scrape our bagels gently off of the cookie sheet and plop them in the water to boil the outside. And to get a good chew, I like to leave my bagels in the water for 45 seconds to a minute, but you can decide what consistency you prefer once you try it out yourself. It's been about 45 seconds, and so now I'm going to flip my bagels to get the other side boiling as well. The first time I made bagels, they sunk right to the bottom, like rocks. And it was because I didn't give them enough time on the second rise to really puff up properly. So if that happens to you, it's okay. My first round just came out a little denser, but once you get the float, they'll be even fluffier. Okay, and I just pulled my wire rack out from my little oven. If you have a large oven, you can pull your wire rack out of there and set your freshly boiled bagels onto it to help any excess water drain off before we bake them. Now, at this point, if you're cool with plain bagels, you can leave them as is, but if you do want to add some type of seed, like an everything bagel topping, while the bagel is still warm and slightly wet, you can dip it into your topping. So I have some everything but the bagel seeds right here, and we'll add the bagel. Just give it a good dip. And if your seeds aren't wanting to stick to the bagel, just put a little of the hot water back onto the bagel with a brush, and that will help. If you haven't already done so, it's time to preheat your oven. If you have a full-size oven, 400 degrees Fahrenheit. If you have a little countertop oven like me, 350 degrees Fahrenheit will do. And since I have a small little countertop oven, we're gonna bake these bagels in 2 batches. So that's why I only boiled the large bagels first. I dusted my cookie sheet with a little cornmeal for that dusty bottom, but you can also just grease it with butter. to help your bagels from sticking. This is our amazing Cuisinart countertop oven. We absolutely love it. Not only does it do everything that a standard oven can, but it also can dehydrate, and it's an air fryer. So for our bagels, I'm going to set it to bake at 350. And I like to check them at 16 minutes to see if they're looking golden and ready to come out. If you have a full-size oven at 450 degrees, they'll be done after about 20 minutes. Once these bagels are close to being done, I will boil the mini bagels to get them ready for the next batch. Okay, everybody, so I've been making mini bagels for months and haven't made full-size ones in a while. So I did let these go for a couple more minutes after the 16-minute timer went off. But you know, how do you like your steak? How do you like your bagel? You get to decide how golden you want them to be. But these look pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna transfer these so that I can use this cookie sheet to bake the mini bagels. No need to let the bagels cool. They're ready to be consumed. So let's cut into one and see how they turned out. Ooh. That nice crunch. Beautiful. They smell so good too. Like I shared earlier, my husband and I eat a mini sourdough bagel for breakfast practically every morning. We throw them in the toaster, we slather some grass-fed butter on top, and then we add some of my homemade Instapot cream cheese on top of that. And it's a really excellent breakfast. It tends to sustain us all the way until lunch. We don't get hunger pains. So I'm glad we found a good way to feed ourselves. I know everybody is different, but I'm excited for you to give this a try. Oh, and I forgot to mention, if you are making Instapot cream cheese along with me and you save your whey from that recipe, you can replace the water in your bagels with the whey that you've saved to add a little bit of protein into your bagels and a whole lot of trace minerals just to boost up the good stuff. I've supplied links below for all of the equipment that I shared in this video. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment, let me know how your bagels turned out. I would love to hear, and happy healthy eating.